Happy Thursday to you. It is Thursday, April 2021, and I thought I'd just get on and share some interesting things just to practice this live streaming stuff with you all. Some important dates or some important events that are on 18 November throughout the ages. So let me see if I can share with you guys this Wikipedia page. Here it is. Okay, let's see if this is working. I'm just going to go back over here real quick. All right. Well, we'll just bear with me, and I'll read it to you. And let me see if I can do something else here. Go. Does that make a difference? Yeah, kind of, doesn't it? Let's share something interesting. Well, ancient history, and sometimes not so ancient history. And in this day and age, it can be things that happened 20 years, it could be a million years ago, and things that are due to happen or we expect to happen down the road a week or two from now seem like forever from now. So I just thought I'd share some things. And this Wikipedia page, it just says November 18. I have a military background, so I say 18 November. I know they other places they use that format in stating the date. Like I think in Europe they may do that in some places in Europe, but they do it. But it says here November 18. It says here that today is the 322nd day of the year, and if it were leap year, 323rd. In the Gregorian calendar, and 43 days remain. Wow, 43. We're so close to 2022, and that's kind of it. Really want to be as far away from that lockdown last year as possible. So let's see. I'm not going to go through everything because that's just kind of exhausting. But I will. Let me see. Let's see. In 1493, it says here in 1493, Christopher Columbus first sights the island now known as Puerto Rico. Well, that's significant because some of my ancestors are supposedly, they come from Puerto Rico. So that's kind of a cool little anecdote, personal to my own family history. Anything else? We'll push on to more recent in history, 1601 to 1900. Let's see. St. Peter's Basilica is consecrated. That's a big deal, right? Pretty historic and significant piece of architecture. Let's see, 1803, Battle of Vitrier, the last major battle of the Haitian Revolution, is fought leading to the establishment of the Republic of Haiti, the first Black republic in the Western Hemisphere. I think this is very, very significant because not only is it the first quote-unquote Black republic, but it is the first republic in the Western Hemisphere, or I would say even in the world, where every citizen had equal voting rights. And I think more people, we should all, it's my opinion, and I think and I learned this in history class in college, the significance of Haiti in the Haitian Revolution, because this island nation defeated three empires. This little island nation made of former slaves and slaveholders, men and women, defeated and gained liberation and independence from three separate empires. Haiti was known as the jewel of the French Empire, as India was known as the jewel of the British Empire. And the Haitians were able to maintain or were to establish and maintain independence from the French, the Spanish, and the British, who all sought to exploit the riches of Haiti. And if we were to take a look at Haiti today, we would see that Haiti has suffered tremendously as a result of the injustices that were brought upon them as punishment for their independence from France. More importantly, as an American, as the importance of the Haitian Revolution is that's one of the contributing factors to the Louisiana Purchase, which granted the United States a much larger territory and that was previously held by the French, as a way of supposedly recovering from debt. But the thing about the Louisiana Purchase is that I don't think there's any money ever exchanged between the United States and France. So it seems like it was more of a symbolic gesture. But if anyone has any information about that, pass it along. But I'm pretty sure it was kind of a symbolic gesture, and no coins were passed along to the French from the United States, who was at the time still in debt from the American Revolution and the War of 1812 and all that stuff. They were still in debt in that time too. But so it's just Haiti is a great case study when we look at the great experiment that is democracy, and also when we look at it was one of the first. It was the beginning of the end of colonialism. It was one of of course, the United States, the beginning, or we'll just say the American Revolution, or the revolt of the colonies in North America against the British Empire, was, they said, the shot heard around the world. But that report passed on to Haiti and then other countries, and lasted well into the 20th century, especially after the Second World War in the 50s and 60s, and even into the 70s and 80s. So I think it's really important to reflect on just how influential Haiti has been in the history of democracy and in the transition from colonial powers to more and more emergence of smaller nations, which were once colonized by European empires, into sovereign members of the world community. So that's a big deal. So 1803, 1809, naval action. The Napoleonic Wars, French frigates defeat British East Indiamen in the Bay of Bengal. That's very interesting. Small footnote. 1812, right? Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Cressonnois ends in French defeat, but Marshal of France Michel Ney's leadership leads him to becoming known as the bravest of the brave. Didn't know about him. Gotta love Wikipedia. Now, and conversely, as colonies started to fall away from European powers, the landscape of Europe began to change as a result. And some of these smaller kingdoms and the emergence of nationalism started to shift. And for instance, on this day in 1863 in Europe, King Christian IX of Denmark signs the November Constitution that declares Schleswig to be part of Denmark. This is seen by the German Confederation as a violation of the London Protocol and leads to the German-Danish War of 1864. Yes, so many people, when they think of Germany, they think of course, the Second World War or World War I. They think of World War II, of course, and then they think of East and West Germany, the Cold War. But before Germany was Germany, it was the German Federation and it was the German Empire. Hitler had his quote-unquote Third Reich, but what about the other two Reichs? And the Weimar Republic and that sort of thing. So this is a big deal because the borders that make up Germany today have shifted so many times in history. And as we know, Germany's one of the strongest, if not the strongest economy in Europe today, and one of the strongest economies in the world. And rightfully so. They've got their act together. Um, they suffered greatly as a result of the First World War, and of course the Second World War. Managed to make a comeback after the Cold War, and are very responsible for uh, the economy in Europe thriving even in these uncertain times. So much props to Germany. And believe me, they have not they are not lost on the lessons of their past. That is for sure. There are a few knuckleheads over there, the neo-Nazis, but for the most part, the German people and the German government are quite they're the more mature and responsible governments in the European Union. And if I'm wrong, prove me wrong. That's fine, but that's my opinion. 1872, Susan B. Anthony and 14 other women are arrested for voting illegally in the United States presidential election of 1872. This goes right back to what I was saying about Haiti. So we have in 1803, the Haitian Revolution, which kind of, lasted several years actually. And then all Haitian citizens have the right to vote. And yet here in the United States at that time, actually further after, right? So decades later, Susan B. Anthony and 14 other women are women's suffrage is still necessary to get the vote, not only here in the United States, but in other countries as well, like, for instance, England, or I should say the United Kingdom, right? So it's very, very interesting and I want to say, for me as an American, kind of embarrassing to know that other countries, like this small republic of Haiti, comparatively small, which was made up of the former African slaves and their slaveholders, European slaveholders, and their local indigenous population. I don't want to omit them from their history. They all deserve to be recognized. All peoples deserve to be recognized. Were decades ahead of their time in having voting rights for their citizens, whereas it would take over take the 20th century for the United States to finally catch up and give women their rightful say in elections. And how sad, I think, that we denied ourselves the voice of women in our political to help us govern ourselves. That the American government and a people chose to hinder and handicap ourselves by not having women as part of that voice. It's embarrassing to me, anyway. I'm glad we have them now. I'm glad there are women in government and in positions of leadership in the corporate world and in society as a whole, to give balance and voice to our creators, our beloved mothers and sisters and daughters, who bring so much nurturing and insight and wisdom to our experience. We absolutely need to continue to support and take and get out of the way. Men have often historically taken up space that rightfully belongs to women in society, in governance, in business. And so it's great that Haiti set a precedent, and such courage of Susan B. Anthony and other suffragettes in this country and in other countries who, at great risk, fought and petitioned under great duress and resistance to have their voices heard. They should not have had to have fought any harder. Like, for instance, when the former African slaves were granted the right to vote, that was for the men and not the women. And we had an opportunity in American history, we had an opportunity to right a wrong on many levels, to give what? Representation to those who would be taxed. That was the cry, right? No taxation without representation. And yet that injustice was perpetuated on a demographic within our own culture and our own people. Not okay. I'm glad we've made it right. I'm sorry that it's taken so long. Moving right along. Let's see what else is going on here. Let's see, 1883. American and Canadian Railroads institute 5 standard continental time zones, ending the confusion of thousands of local times. This is interesting. This is actually really, really something that we all take for granted and really had no idea where it came from. Maybe there are some who are more trivial in their knowledge and have and know about that, but I did not. And I know a lot about a lot of things. I know a little bit about everything and a lot about a few things. And it's interesting that the railroads, it makes sense too, because in 1883, rail travel was a new technology. It was as new in the 19th century as air travel was in the 20th century, and space travel is beginning to be in the 21st century. So it makes sense that they would have to coordinate a time zone difference. They'd had to come up with that. Like, it's pretty scientific when you think about it. In order to make sure that trains arrive and depart on time so people can get to where they need to go and goods can be transported across the vastness of the North American continent efficiently and effectively and in a timely manner. So that's so fascinating to me. 1883, they came up with that. 5 standard continental time zones. Gosh, it had to have been confusing, huh? 1901 to present. Let's see what's going on. Oh, this is a good one. So Panama Canal, right? So travel, once again, the theme of travel. 1901, Britain and the United States signed the Hay-Pauncefote. I did not. Pauncefote Treaty. Hay-Pauncefote Treaty. I probably am butchering that word, and I beg all of your pardon for that, which nullifies the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty and withdraws British objections to an American-controlled controlled canal in Panama. So this was I guess, end of British resistance to the creation and construction of the Panama Canal, which has made transoceanic travel so much easier for over a century. In 1903, Hay-Bunai-Varela Treaty, which signed the United States and Panama, giving the United States exclusive rights over the Panama Canal Zone. There you go. 1905, Prince Karl of Denmark becomes King Haakon the Seventh of Norway. That's fascinating. You know, this is just so much about European history that, you know, I just don't know. And it's fascinating to me. And that period of time in the early transitory years between the 19th or 20th centuries, you know, going on. A lot was going on, which shifted us into a new age. Wow, 1909. I guess I'm kind of being more specific here in these. I'll just keep going. The 2 United States warships are sent to Nicaragua after 500 revolutionaries, including 2 Americans, are executed by order of Jose Santos Zelaya. Eesh. Wow. A lot of unrest. And Nicaragua has seen unrest, for, I guess, probably most of the 20th century. 1910, in their campaign for women's voting rights. More story about the suffragettes. Hundreds of suffragettes march to the British Parliament in London. Several are beaten by police. Newspaper attention embarrasses the authorities, and the march is dubbed Black Friday. So that's interesting, being as how we consider Black Friday to be the great day for shopping, but it has a significant and tragic meaning, origin, I would say. And I don't know if there are any more Black Fridays in history, but this certainly causes me to think and contemplate about what that means. And now my perception of Black Friday will be forever changed. 1916. World War I, the First Battle of the Somme in France. British Expeditionary Forces, or the BEF, Commander Douglas Haig, calls off the battle, which started on July 1, 1916. So 1 July to 18 November. And I cannot tell you the number of casualties that were part of that battle, but they were thousands, tens of thousands. Human beings throwing themselves at each other, being slaughtered by each other. And I just spoken about, we need to love our neighbor and take care of each other and take care of the planet. So just another reminder of how we need to evolve and develop as a world community to take care of one another, because things like that, which took place before, and it was a stark indicator of the world losing its innocence around the implementation of what was then advanced technology of, for instance, the machine gun, chemical weapons, poison gas, mustard gas specifically, and of course the aeroplane, aviation, yeah, submarine was another thing. Unrestricted warfare. Wow. Thank God it's over. And I hope that we as a people, as a species, as world citizens, will always remember the generations who gave their lives during the first war, during these wars, World War I and the First Great War, the Supplemental Wars. That's how intense it was. And it's hard for us today to contemplate the impact that the First World War had on the face of the world, but it did. It did so much so that a Second World War took place as a result. And the Cold War and the hot wars that were during the Cold War. And we are still even seeing the residue of the First World War. I would not have gone to Iraq in 2003 had it not been for the events that took place during the First World War, by the way. If you want more information about that, I encourage you the Arab Revolt and T.E. Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia, to get more insight as to why the British and the coalition and the Americans went into Iraq in 2003, and why there is an Iraq. Also, the war in Lebanon in the 1980s, the Arab-Israeli conflict, all of that stems back to events that took place around the time of the First World War. 1918, Latvia declares its independence from Russia. That's a big deal. And at the time, of course, Russia had just become a Soviet Union. They're reorganizing after the Bolshevik Revolution, so they were leaving. They were no longer a Russian empire and a monarchy. They are now the Soviet Union. Now this is big in the entertainment industry. In 1928, release of the animated short Steamboat Willie, the first fully synchronized sound cartoon directed by Walt Disney and Ub Iwerks, featuring the third appearance of cartoon characters Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. This is considered by the Disney Corporation to be Mickey's birthday. Today's happy birthday, Mickey Mouse. 1929, Grand Banks earthquake. Okay, let's fast forward to World War II. 1940, World War II, German leader Adolf Hitler and Italian Foreign Minister Galeazzo Ciano meet to discuss Benito Mussolini's disastrous Italian invasion of Greece. And of course, those of us who know World War history know that Germany did historically prosecuted an airborne invasion of Crete, the island of Crete, as part of the invasion of Greece. And this would lead to, after the liberation of Greece during World War II, fighting amongst communists and allied forces for control of Greece. And at the time, Greece was supposedly it was a monarchy until the revolution, and there's a lot more. And if you guys have watched The Crown on Netflix or are familiar with the British royal family, we know that Prince Philip, the royal consort to the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, was his father was of the royal family. His father was a king of Greece, I believe. Let's see. 1943, World War II again. The Battle of Berlin. 440 Royal Air Force planes bomb Berlin, causing only light damage and killing 131. RAF loses 9 aircraft and 53 air crew. Now, this is a big deal, and I'm a World War II history guy. I always have been since I was a small child, like 5, 6, 7 years old. And this was probably that Battle of Berlin. Most of those aircraft probably were flying at night, and they probably were Lancasters and Halifax bombers. And those, carrying, I think, something like 8 or 9 men per aircraft, something like that. So that was a lot. What amazes me, this is the real miracle, actually. What is so surprising is that only light damage and killing 131. Conversely, when we look at the bombings of Hamburg and Dresden, for instance, or Hamburg, like the British, like 40,000, 50,000, tens of thousands of German civilians were killed by Allied bombers during those campaigns over those cities. And of course, much of Germany's industrial metropolises and industrial centers were bombed to literally to oblivion. Thousands. This is why I say I made my comment about Germany being so responsible, because they have suffered greatly for their wisdom, and are very, very responsible, knowing what happened, and having been punished severely for their transgressions during the Second World War, during Hitler's Nazi regime. The German people, when we think about the German people, actually are also victims of World War II in that regard. They were enraptured by a charismatic leader, and they were swept up by a government that subtly and very strategically wrested their civil rights from them in the name of safety and security, to the point where, we know what happened. And to me, it is a cautionary tale. Yes. What else? More. Let's come back to the hemisphere over here. Excuse me. 1944, this popular socialist youth is founded in Cuba. And as we know, Cuba is a communist nation. And so that was the seed planted for the communist revolution in Cuba, and which nearly led to a new war between the United States and the 1960s, the Cuban Missile Crisis. We came a hair close to destroying the planet. 1947, 1949, okay. 1961. 1961, United United States President John F. Kennedy, 18,000 troops, military advisors to South Vietnam. So we know that was the beginning of a more public involvement with in the Vietnam War, which is Vietnam's war for independence. Vietnam started out as an independent kingdoms, I think, and then colonized by the French. And then during the Second World War, after the fall of France to Nazi Germany, the Vichy government, the false government sponsored by Nazi Germany, ceded what they called Indochina, Vietnam, to Japanese control during the Second World War. And then after World War II ended, they quote unquote, they got their colony back. And then, Vietnam, the Vietnamese people had to fight for generations to gain their independence. And they are a sovereign nation now, and rightfully so, self-governing. And I believe they are still experiencing the fallout from having been bombed and having war across up and down their country, their land. But we have a good relationship with Vietnam today, thank God. And they are a thriving nation. They have a lot of wealth. They have a rich culture. Of course, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world to visit. And beautiful people. The heart and soul of the Vietnamese people is something to behold. And they are independent. 1963. This is funny. The first push-button telephone goes into service. Like, what's a telephone? We don't even have buttons really on our phones anymore. We have touch screens. This is what would, I think, kids these days would be like, that's ancient technology. Yeah, you mean you have to plug your phone into the wall? You can't take it with you or put it in your pocket? Are you crazy? So 1970, U.S. President Richard Nixon asked the U.S. Congress for a Cambodian government. That's interesting. A lot of stuff was going on in Southeast Asia at the time, 1960s and early 70s. More. Remember, going back to Haiti in the United States, or colonies, right? 1971, Oman declares its independence from the United Kingdom. Let's see. 1978. This is tragic, but this is the anniversary of the Jonestown massacre. Didn't realize that. I'm kind of glad I decided to do a video about this stuff, because this is a big deal. Jonestown, Guyana, Jim Jones led his pull to mass murder-suicide that claimed 918 lives in all. 909 of them in Jonestown itself, including over 270 children. Congressman Leo Ryan is murdered by members of the People's Temple hours earlier. This is truly a moment in history. So many children. And it just another example of blindly following a charismatic leader. I really want to encourage everyone to think critically and be introspective. When we read the news, or we listen to the news, or watch the news, on whatever platform that we watch, that we experience it, we get that information, and then, if you could, sit with the information, and then sit with how you feel about it in your body, and really, really measure between your mind and your body, your heart, about what's being conveyed to you, and compare that to what is true for you as a person. Because I think if more people did that, situations like Jonestown, or even the Second World War in Germany, Nazi Germany, and in Italy with Benito Mussolini and his charismatic personality, taking advantage of a very vulnerable people in a very difficult time. And as we know, that the past year and a half or so has been almost 2 years, no, year and a half, have been pretty intense for the world, and we've been struggling to deal with fear and uncertainty, which makes us vulnerable, not only as individuals, but as a people, as people across the world. So I encourage you all to take a moment to take stock of what your internal experience is and connect to your own truth about what you are being told. And I encourage you to act on that wisdom, whatever that is for you. And it's not anyone's business to tell you otherwise. I just encourage you all to think critically and connect to yourselves. Heavy, man. 1988, war on drugs. President Ronald Reagan signs a bill into law allowing the death penalty for drug traffickers. Wow. Talk about contrast. When we think about how marijuana has been legalized in many of the states in the United States, and how it was possession of a certain amount of marijuana on one's person could lead to lengthy imprisonment, of which so many Americans today are still serving unjustly because they've not least been exonerated because marijuana has been legalized in certain states. We need to really look at that and examine that and make it right. Because it's like, suppose Tylenol or aspirin was illegal and everybody's popping Bayer, right? Heart attack patients, people who've experienced heart attacks, they go to the drugstore, they go to Long's or CVS or wherever, Walmart, Target, buy a bottle of Bayer, and just think if, like, before 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, owning aspirin would have been a capital, would have, not a capital offense, excuse me, would have been a serious offense, and these people for taking aspirin or selling aspirin or having aspirin would be put in jail for 20 years. Because that's what's happening now, is marijuana is being normalized as it's legalized. It's been legalized because it's been normalized. And people are in prison right now because they had it before. And there's so much that has been wrong in the world that we need to make right, and we cannot delay any longer. We cannot. We must take action immediately to right these wrongs, to correct these injustices, and make proper reparations, especially to those who have suffered so much. Not just the individuals who've been incarcerated, but also their families who have suffered from the separation and the collateral damage that comes from a person being separated from their family. Many of these people are fathers who have had to suffer as their children have grown to adulthood without the presence of their father. It has a dramatic effect on a person's development. And these children who have had to do without their fathers, knowing that their father was imprisoned for something so silly, so absolutely silly, because of some proclamation, some short-sighted proclamation. Moving along. 1991. Shiite Muslim kidnappers in Lebanon relieved church envoys Terry Waite and Thomas Sutherland. People who, these two individuals, there's been a lot of study in psychology around the effects that their captivity has had on them, and help understand stress and trauma and other things. They were held captives for a long period of time. Then let's see. This is a big one now. I'm going 1993 in the United States, the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, is approved by the House of Representatives. And one of the things that NAFTA did was it allowed companies to take their production overseas in exchange for nominal tariffs or no tariffs on goods imported from overseas. And what it did was it shifted in a major way the United States economy from being a producing economy to a consuming economy, putting us in a rather weak economic position. Just so you know. So let's see, South Africa. This is a big one now. This is a big one. In my opinion, this is a really big one. In South Africa, 21 political parties approve a new constitution, expanding voting rights and ending white minority rule. Let's go back to Haiti. Everyone gets to vote, regardless of color or sex or former station in society. Everyone has equal voting rights. Just saying. 1993 versus what, 1805, 1803? Wow, yikes. Why does it take so long, you know? Like one of those things like why did it take so long for us to put wheels on luggage? Like why does it take so long for us to make sure that everybody has their right to vote? People, we'll get there. Hopefully we will advance and not destroy ourselves. 1996, 1999. Something more, here we go, something more pertinent to my own life path is the 2002 Iraq disarmament crisis. United Nations weapons inspectors led by Hans Blix arrive in Iraq, in which they subsequently claimed that there were weapons of mass destruction, which was, you know what, we need to go invade Iraq and overthrow Saddam Hussein. Overthrowing Saddam Hussein was not a bad idea. However, we could have been a bit more honest about it. And we could have done a better job at supporting a transitional government that would have allowed the Iraqi people to have safety and security and develop economic thrive economically, as opposed to having them deal with, you know, a still damaged, crippled infrastructure and uncertainty in their government, political unrest, partisanship, you know, being pulled between the Shiite nation and their former enemy, Iran, and the Western world, where and then ISIS, Islam, and radical. I don't call it Islam. I don't think it's Islam at all. These extreme groups, because what I know of Islam, the little bit that I know of Islam, is that it is not about extremism. It is not about waging wars or fatwas. It's about being peaceful and loving and respectful. And in many ways, that unfortunately the Western world, the Christian world, fails to do. I don't know. I'm not a Muslim. I don't really subscribe to any one religion other than, like, I just want us to be loving and kind to one another and take care of one another. And all the religions, they seem to say the same thing, which is two words, in my opinion: be cool. Just be cool. Be cool. So much more than that, but if we all are just cool with one another, then it's all good and we'll be good. So that's a big deal. Here's another big one. This is a big one for us when it comes to being kind and loving to one another and acceptance, because so many people have suffered from judgment and exclusion, condemnation. People have been killed for this. People have killed themselves for this. And in 2003, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court rules 4-3 in Goodrich versus the Department of Public Health that the state's ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional, and gives the state legislature 180 days to change the law, making Massachusetts the first state in the United States to grant marriage rights to same-sex couples. November 18. Wow. So just think about who it is that you know, or people that may be in your life or even in your family that are oriented toward loving and partnering with the same sex, and what that means for them to have who they are and how they are as people normalized and legalized, and they can be in their free expression and love who they wish to love and marry who they wish to marry. And that ball started rolling on this day in 2003. Let's see. In 2013, on this day, November 18, NASA launches the Maven probe to Mars. Mars is, of course, over the last few years been a big topic when we talk about space travel and space and technology and wanting to go to Mars or send people to Mars. So that was a big day in that whole effort. 2020, just last year, the Utah Monolith, built sometime in 2016, is discovered by state biologists of the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. And I think they still don't know who built the darn things. I don't know. And there's let's see. There's births of famous folks, but I don't think I'll go into all of that. It's just so much information, and we've been on here for a while, and I just thought I'd share some of these very important anecdotes in our history. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for, we've been on here for quite a while. I just want to say thank you to all of you for spending this time with me and going through some of these great important moments. By the way, that what I mentioned is not all inclusive. I did omit some things, a few, especially in the earlier years prior to the 20th century. But I stayed more with what I was more thorough with what was current. So I just like to share all that with you and spend a little time with you today, going over the importance of some of these events that took place on this day, November 18 November in history. So thank you all. I hope that you enjoyed the content that I shared. The link to that, the link to that Wikipedia page is in the description. If you like what I'm bringing to you, feel free to donate. You can do the like, share, subscribe thing, share it if you find it interesting. And I just appreciate you spending this time with me, however long you've been with me today. And I look forward to next time. Until then, take care.